Hi, everybody. Welcome to Reigniting Small Business Podcast, the podcast with SBI. I'm Laura Richards, and I'm here today with Patrick Lee. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, everybody.
So, everyone, last week, the U.S. Senate walked away from negotiations that would have extended a lifeline to small businesses. Now, lots of experts are predicting the loss of millions of small businesses over the next 6 months. And it looks like we might be looking at an economic catastrophe. So with that in mind today, we want to take a look and revisit in some cases and visit in others at how cities and local communities can extend a lifeline to small businesses. So with that, Patrick, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We discussed on a previous podcast some of the ways in which we were encouraging small business owners to get involved in their local economic communities and how to advocate and how to go to the chambers and go to their economic development and really try to get involved. And one of the examples that we brought up was Prosper Portland. And I think we probably need to look at that a little bit deeper and then look at some other options there. But I do think it's kind of important to set the stage of all this. We're right now we're in that perfect storm. This is an election year, and our political system has set itself up to where it is simply not going to lead. It's not going to work in a unified way for the good of everybody. It is going to maintain its partisanship and its stark inability to work across the aisles. And it's going to do it to the detriment of small business and the folks who work in small business. I mean, we've seen the unemployment benefits run out with no ability of Congress and the White House to come to any sort of agreement to extend any of that. We know that there's probably not going to be a significant additional stimulus bill passed until after the election. Everything is around the election, but we've got all this time, right now, where businesses are entering into, for some of them, what would be an incredibly important season, right? The holiday season's coming up, and there's this need to get going if they're going to get going. And I think knowing full well that where we expect to get the support or the rescue or whatever we want to term it, it's not going to come from there. What options do we have? So let's jump back and revisit the Prosper Portland a little bit. When we talked about Prosper Portland, we sort of laid out that was one of those initiatives that economic development had taken to sort of bring the community together in a way that was very positive and get people interacting and working together. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of PR. There's a lot of, a call to action type of stuff. So I think that's really important. I think those are important things, but I think we also got to look at other aspects of this problem, because a lot of business owners are like, all that feel-good stuff is great, but bottom line is we need money, right? So let's first go and let's look at a little bit more detail on Prosper Portland. I think you have more information about exactly what they were doing.
Right. So this was their strategic plan, really. Economic development in Portland came up with a 5-point strategic plan. And all of it, as you said, sounds really great, but may not provide and probably won't provide the immediate relief. And some of the other initiatives we'll look into in other cities across the country actually are very grassroots, very tangible and immediate. But this was a great outline, and definitely they're on the forward-thinking edge of what economic development is doing in our country. So their 5-pronged approach included creating healthy, complete neighborhoods. So just really striving to strengthen that whole community being tied together, from everything from diversity to the type of goods and services that are provided. And that really, Patrick, goes back to what we talk about. What is a Main Street? Why are Main Streets important? They're recognizing that with that first prong of their piece. Increasing access to high quality employment. And that also goes hand in glove with sustaining small business, because we already know that 44% of the jobs in the economy are created by small businesses. So if you lose small business, you lose many of those positions.
And that's a interesting thing, because 44% is a very large percent, but it also creates most of the quality jobs. So it may not be 50%, but it's the quality jobs that are being created in the small businesses. It's not the minimum wage work at Walmart jobs that we're talking about here.
Absolutely. Foster wealth creation within communities of color and low income neighborhoods. So another very, important thing to help them figure out how to create wealth and among, in a diverse group, and improving the success rate and trajectory of the small businesses within those diverse communities. And that's another point that they have there. And form 21st century civic networks, institutions, and partnerships. And Patrick, that's exactly what we're talking about. Those partnerships are the underlying fundamental thing that need to be developed right now, both short-term and long-term. Short-term, where's the money? Show me the money so I can keep my small business open.
Right.
Operate in an equitable, innovative, and financially sustainable agency. This is for the agency themselves. Obviously, they want to model an equitable workplace, which is the same that they want to see develop across their economic development platform, and be on that cutting edge like they are right now to continue to be innovative. So you and I, when we were talking about Prosper Portland, we were like, let's go out and see what other examples we could find. And we tried to, find some other examples of cities that were doing this. I think Portland really is on the cutting edge for getting this wrapped into a full strategic plan. But there are many other places out of necessity that are responding to have an impact today to help keep small businesses in their community open.
And one of the things I think we need to weave into this is that sometimes in some of these communities, the reason that they rose to the occasion, right, is that they were waiting, as a lot of us are, for things to come from where we expect them to come, from the federal government or statewide. But the local communities frequently are faced with multiple issues. Like, we have a pandemic. We have this situation, but we've seen a record number of tropical storms and hurricanes hit land this year. It's record number. We see the wildfires going on the West Coast and the drought there. A lot of these communities rose up not because they were necessarily more forward thinking than others, but because they were forced to get beyond the expectation of a rescue. It's like, we either do something right here, right now, or this community ceases to exist.
That isn't exactly right, Patrick. And this exact thing happened in the little city of Staunton, Virginia, the first week of August. So they had a storm cell that basically stalled there. And if you've seen how many named storms we have this year, we're in the Greek alphabet. Pretty soon we'll be at Z or something. But there have been a ton of them, and they're not necessarily damaging with wind. They're stalling out and just dumping water. And that's exactly what happened to the city of Staunton. And essentially, they got 4 feet of floodwaters that ran through their downtown. Cars went through windows. It kind of brought up for me locally the Ellicott City floods that we had here in our community. That's what it sounded like. So they had about 50 businesses that were flooded out. And this came on the heels of 6 months of the pandemic. So it was pretty catastrophic. The revenues were already down 70 to 80% in that area. So the Staunton Downtown Development Association quickly went into gear. They organized a GoFundMe. They got over $100,000 in donations in 4 hours. And nearly 90% of the businesses that were affected by the floods have reopened. That is tremendous. Like, I have goosebumps right now. Talk about, turning it around, thinking out of the box, doing something to immediately help these business owners. That's the kind of partnership and engagement
And what I liked about that example is we just touched on, a GoFundMe and the reopening, but the way it started was they organized teams of folks to come together and clean up the mess. So it started with what we all understand we can do, right? We come together as a group, we deal with situations, we meet, we handle something. So it's always easier, I think, to get that momentum on these type of initiatives when there's something tangible like that, like all these flooded out areas. We need to take all the trash out. We got to clean it up. We got to do this. We got to board up windows.
Right.
So everybody comes together and they do that work. But once that starts, that momentum carries over to the conversations. Like, okay, how are we going to fund this? Well, somebody says, well, I've used GoFundMe before. Do we want to try to do this? Right. And I think that's key. I think you can't sit here and say, yeah, Prosper Portland sounds great, but it's not going to put any money in my pocket and I'm about to go under. Well, this is a holistic thing. If we're trying to salvage a community, you need to get involved. You need to do that stuff, because what comes from that will be connections, will be ideas, will be all those things that lead to a Prosper Portland, right? So yeah. I think Staunton is a great example of this. It was because of the flooding that they came together and designed this, not because of the 6 months of pandemic that had already decimated their community.
That's exactly right. Necessity is the mother of invention, and they were pushed to the point where they absolutely needed help. And I think people want to help, but they don't know where to start. So when you can go, scoop mud out of somebody's building, it's tangible. So how do we get people something tangible that they could be doing in order to engage more people, in order to gain the momentum that you're talking about?
And I think you have another example that we'll touch on now of where local government received CARES Act money, but they themselves received it, and they didn't use it the way it was intended. They turned it around and repurposed it to help their small businesses and their community. So why don't you talk about that one a little bit?
All right. So this was in Colorado. Colorado has a very innovative statewide loan program called the GAP Fund. And what they basically did was take their own CARES money and offer loans to businesses with fewer than 25 employees, which they felt like were the ones hardest hit. So they also raised money from public and private sources, another additional $25 million. And the average funding request was about $24,000. So, it wasn't enough to help everyone. So if they had one, peeve, it would have been to have been able to help more. But they had 1,500 applications in the first 24 hours. But it is an example of, thinking outside the box about what can be done on a government level to help.
So if you would, I know you've got a list of some of the areas that have actually taken on from a local or regional efforts to deal with the economic side for small business. And I think they serve, obviously, if you're in that area listening to us, if there are any of you, it lets you know that exists. But I think this is much more of I think we tend to think of things very isolated, like, okay, Prosper Portland, but nobody else is doing it. And I'm sure that they had, something special that allowed this to happen. We have to get past this mindset of the status quo around us is acceptable. It's not. And these are examples of folks who've actually taken the time, the effort to design, implement, put in place initiatives strictly to deal with this themselves. And more gets done on the local level. We understand each other on local level. The partisanship, it may still be there, but it's much less. I watch these local business owners who are on different sides of the political environment interact well together in their local communities. So it isn't what we watch when we watch the news and we watch this partisanship and anger and all this stuff that is pushed down on us. That exists out there, but it doesn't exist at the levels that we're made to believe. We tend to want, as a community, to support each other, to rise to the occasion, to do these things. So this list, I think, is a great example of those areas that formalize this. And it's not an example like Prosper Portland of more the PR and camaraderie. These are ones that are providing money. So why don't you rattle off a few of those for us?
Well, Patrick, one of them is Augusta County, Virginia, of which Staunton is in Augusta County. But they also took their CARES Act money and repurposed it to give to, help small businesses specifically. And then in Charlotte, North Carolina, they have a program that's somewhat similar to Prosper Portland, but they did a bunch of things specifically for the pandemic. So their program is called Open for Business. It was a COVID response, but what they've done is create a directory so you can see all the Charlotte small businesses. Any business in Charlotte can go and register themselves there. They can post modified hours, changes to service and delivery, special offers, and people are using it. It's become one of those useful tools in the community, which is great because it ingratiates people to them and it helps the business owners. So it's a very reciprocal relationship that works very well. And they have a dashboard there for businesses. So businesses can go there and find out all the information about grants and government funding, as well as local community things. So they have mentorship program for businesses. They have resources for micro businesses that are specifically for 5 or less employees. And they have a host of other grants and funds that you can apply for, the larger Mecklenburg County Stabilization Fund, et cetera, a resiliency fund, a fund for artists. So they've just amalgamated resources, posted them there so they get the businesses coming there, but they also are serving the community with information going outward, which is also serving the businesses. So very targeted, very specific, and completely COVID related.
And we were talking a couple of days ago around in our local area how the restaurants sort of teamed together on a Facebook initiative, I believe, to create carry out. And I think you basically had attributed, you thought that this had saved a whole bunch of restaurants in our area's lives because of this. So talk a little bit about that one.
It's phenomenal. It's called Annapolis Takeout, and it was just started by a concerned citizen, somebody that cared about our local restaurants, that wanted to make sure we can keep as many of them around as we can keep around. Only positive comments are left, so you don't post anything that isn't positive. You're only giving recommendations is basically the deal. I personally have found out about restaurants I would have never thought to go to. It wouldn't have occurred to me, and it's amazing. And it's funny because, you were talking about what we have going on Capitol Hill in terms of, things being polarized. One thing that's nice is just to know that when you go someplace, you're going to only receive good news. And I think it's one of the reasons why this page has been so well supported, because it's so positive. People are posting pictures of food and talking about wonderful experiences and thanking for great service to people. And it's really, really taken off.
It's interesting to me to see how we all doubt that the individual can make a difference. But in almost all the initiatives that spring up after something happened, take the Capitol Gazette shooting in Annapolis that happened. There was a bunch of folks who on their own created funds and started raising funds to help families to sort of galvanize around that event. And when those things happen, we always look at the people who step up and do it, and we always are like, wow, that was really great that they did that, and we're so excited, and like you said, there's goosebumps, and we're part of it, but somebody has to start it. So somebody started that, and it's had an incredible impact, and that's such a simple concept. We don't have to get complicated. We don't have to know all the funding mechanisms and everything like that. You remember the first one we talked about, Staunton, it was just a GoFundMe page. They didn't repurpose money. They didn't come up with a bunch of accounting things. They just said, okay, let's do a GoFundMe, and it worked. So we can't allow our own lack of belief in things can work out to stop us from making it work out. These are our businesses. These are our communities. If we don't step up and clear out all the gunk and board up those windows and come together as a team and go after it, nobody's going to. We've seen that our leaders are not going to lead or rescue us. So let's do it.
I hear you. I think one expression that we like to use at SBI comes to mind, which is action changes things. Take action in your community.
Stop thinking, do something.
Exactly. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in to another SBI podcast. We hope to see you again soon, and take care.
Bye, everybody.